Gaza Strip, pounded for yet another night. In the Maghazi neighborhood in central Gaza, wounded are rushed to a nearby hospital. Children badly injured, barely breathing. Medical staff overwhelmed, struggling to cope with the mounting casualties and growing humanitarian disaster. In the south, more unbearable grief. Bodies wrapped in white. Members of the Kalusa and Abbas families, old and young, killed in a strike on their building in Khan Yunis. Their lives cut short, buried just hours after Israel's cabinet agreed to temporarily pause fighting later this week in exchange for the release of 50 hostages. The truce will be a crucial window to get much-needed aid into Gaza. But for those who have already lost so much, the news has brought little hope. What kind of truce are they discussing? A truce just to allow some aid in? Maysara asks. We don't want that. We'll manage with bread. What we truly want is not a truce for aid. We want our homes back. We want to return to our streets. What is the point of a truce if I can't return to my home? If I can't check on my children, my parents, or our businesses? Saddam says. This truce is pointless. We've been sleeping on the streets for 45 days. We have no shelter, no home, nowhere to seek refuge. In the south, the very place people are told to evacuate to seek refuge, more buildings are turned to rubble overnight. Countless graves being dug each day, the death toll now topping 12,000, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, citing data from Hamas-controlled Gaza. Another desperate plea to God, another child killed, relatives struggling to cope. Their grief feared to only get worse. Israel's Prime Minister vowing the war will continue after the truce ends, and with it, more bloodshed. Nada Bashir, CNN, in Jerusalem.
Truce between Israel and Hamas will begin Friday at 7 a.m. local time, with 13 civilian hostages to be released by Hamas hours later. More will follow, with a total of 50 hostages freed over 4 days, while Palestinian prisoners are also released in waves. So, Israel's military also says it has arrested the director of Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, on allegations it served as a Hamas command center. The group and hospital officials deny that charge, of course, because Hamas, I mean, at this point, no offense, you'd have to be a total idiot to not realize that Hamas is just a controlled opposition arm of Israel. Of course, you know, when this stuff usually when the revelation reaches the mainstream, it always is kind of, you know, portrayed as, well, you know, was unintentional in, you know, regards to, we didn't know it was going to be a terrorist organization that'll turn on us and blah, 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 blah. Admit they helped start the group. Now, why would they want to do that? Yep, Yitzhak Segef, who was the Israeli military governor in Gaza in the early 80s, told a New York Times reporter that he had helped finance the Palestinian Islamist movement as a counterweight to the secularists and leftists of the Palestine Liberation Organization and the Fatah Party, led by Yasser Arafat, who himself referred to Hamas as a creature of Israel. Now, why would they do that? So, Avner Cohen, a former Israeli religious affairs official who worked in Gaza for more than 2 decades, told the Wall Street Journal in 2009, Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation. That's at the top here. It isn't to your great regret. Of course not. It's your guys' controlled opposition, so you can have an excuse to bomb and genocide Palestinians and expand your greater Israel project. Cohen even wrote an official report to his superiors warning them not to play divide and rule in the occupied territories by backing Palestinian Islamists against Palestinian secularists. So, I wonder if there's anything that'll pop up. History of false flags.
Iraqi Jews were convinced that Israel had a hand in uprooting them. After the 1948 war, there was mounting popular hostility towards the Jews in Iraq. 5 bombs exploded in Jewish sites. The series of bombs created a panic which led more and more Jews to register to leave the country. I met an elderly friend of my mother's, an Iraqi Jew called Yaakov Karkukli, who had been in the Zionist underground. One member of his group, Yosef Basri, a very, very intelligent Jewish lawyer, and his assistant, Shalom Saleh Shalom, were responsible for 3 out of the 5 bombs. Basri's controller was an Israeli intelligence officer named Max Binet, who was based in Tehran.
Huh. Wow. But they stopped doing that. We know they had to have. It's not like they would, do that with this situation. Laban Affair, a failed Israeli covert operation directed against Egypt in 1954, triggered a chain of events that have had profound consequences for power relationships in the Middle East. The affair's effects still reverberate today. Those events included a public trial and conviction of 8 Egyptian Jews who carried out the covert operation, 2 of whom were subsequently executed, a retaliatory military incursion by Israel into Gaza that killed 39 Egyptians, a subsequent Egyptian-Soviet arms deal that angered American and British leaders, who then withdrew previously pledged support for the building of the Aswan Dam, the announced nationalization of the Suez Canal by Nasser in retaliation for the withdrawn support, and the subsequent failed invasion of Egypt by Israel, France, and Britain in an attempt to topple Nasser. So, in 1954, Israeli military intelligence, known by its Hebrew abbreviation AMAN, activated a sleeper cell that had been tasked with setting off a series of bombs in Egypt. In this risky operation, a small number of Egyptian Jews were to bomb Western and Egyptian institutions in Egypt, hoping the attacks could be blamed on Egyptian opponents of the country's leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, including members of the Muslim Brotherhood of the Communist Party. The ensuing chaos, it apparently was hoped, would persuade Western governments that Nasser's regime was unstable, therefore unworthy of financial and other support. The operation started with the bombing of the Alexandria post office, and within a matter of weeks, 6 other buildings in Alexandria and Cairo also were targeted. But the Egyptian government was apparently told about the next bombing target, and the bomber was arrested. Eventually, Egyptian security rolled up the entire Israeli cell. But they stopped that. They would never do that. Never. Absolutely impossible. Okay, so they also have a history with the, is that the King David Hotel? False flag. The British administrative headquarters for Mandatory Palestine, housed in the southern wing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, were bombed in a terrorist attack on July 22, 1946 by the militant right-wing Zionist underground organization, the Argun, during the Jewish insurgency. 91 people of various nationalities were killed, including Arabs, Britons, and Jews, and 46 were injured. So, God's chosen people would never do something like that, huh? USS Liberty. We all know this one. A lot of us, anyway. Gee, I wonder why they would keep that a secret. You know, God's chosen people, they would never do anything horrible to hurt us. I'll try to... Can you get out of this? No, you can't. But I can read some of this. We can read it. Whatever. That's most it'll let me read, sorry. Yeah, all the survivors stayed. Israel knew exactly what they were doing. Israel declared war on the U.S., unofficially and not in so many words. But not really. I think that, of course, the same elites that own our country own Israel, so using one of their states to attack a ship that belonged to another state of theirs. But anyway. Attack killed 34 U.S. sailors, wounded 171. As the casualties mounted, Israel blocked the ship's distress signals when communications were eventually possible. U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara ordered 12 fighter jets and 4 Taker aircraft to abort their mission to defend the Liberty and return to their aircraft carrier. As napalm and armor-piercing rounds were fired at the ship before torpedoes were used to try to sink in, to sink it. Survivors were shocked when they saw that it was Israelis who were attacking them. Their allies were killing them. They did not know why. To this day, the exact reason for the Israeli attack is not entirely clear, but some U.S. officials and survivors believe that the Israelis were attempting to stop the ship's listening devices, overhearing that Tel Aviv was planning to seize and occupy Syria's Golan Heights, which happened the next day. Others theorize that Israel aimed to draw the U.S. into the war by conducting the attack while posing as Egyptian or other Arab forces. Israel and its supporters, of course, who never lie, claimed that it was a friendly fire incident after the Israelis mistook the USS Liberty for an Egyptian ship. Despite the fact that it was flying the American flag and had clear identification on the hull, the survivors insist that it would have been impossible for the ship not to be identified as a U.S. Navy vessel during the many waves of the attack. Israel later apologized. Well, you just get a slap on the hand. Other countries you would have bombed the shit out of, but okay. As good friends do after killing allies, and offered $6.9 million in compensation. Which to me clearly isn't enough. But anyways, you can... So you also have that interesting story that happened on 9/11. Not sure if it's still up. The dancing Israelis. Let's see what this says. She grabbed her binoculars, watched the destruction unfolding in lower Manhattan, but as she watched the disaster, something else caught her eye. Maria saw the three young men kneeling on the roof of a white van in the parking lot. They seemed to be filming a movie. The men were taking video or photos of themselves with the World Trade Center burning in the background. What struck Maria were the expressions on the men's faces. They were like happy. They didn't look shocked to me. Thought it was very strange. Found the behavior so suspicious, she wrote down a license plate number of the van and called the police. Before long, the FBI was also on the scene, and a statewide bulletin was issued on the van. The plate number was traced to a van owned by a company called Urban Moving. Around 4 p.m. on September 11th, the van was spotted on a service road off Route 3 near New Jersey's Giants Stadium. A police officer pulled the van over, finding 5 men between 22 and 27 years old in the vehicle. The men were taken out of the van at gunpoint and handcuffed by police. The arresting officers said they saw a lot that aroused their suspicion about the men. One of the passengers had $4,700 in cash hidden in his sock. Another was carrying 2 foreign passports. A box cutter was found in the van. But perhaps the biggest surprise for the officers came when the 5 men identified themselves as Israeli citizens. Quote, "We are not your problem," unquote. That was what one of them told the officers. "We are Israeli. We are not your problem. Your problems are our problems. The Palestinians are the problem." When the men were transferred to jail, the case was transferred out of the FBI's criminal division and into the Bureau's Foreign Counterintelligence section, which is responsible for espionage cases. ABC News has learned one reason for the shift, sources told ABC News, was that the FBI believed Urban Moving may have been providing cover for an Israeli intelligence operation. After the 5 men were arrested, the FBI got a warrant and searched Urban Moving's Weehawken, New Jersey offices. The FBI searched Urban Moving's offices for several hours, removing boxes of documents, a dozen computer hard drives. The FBI also questioned Urban Moving's owner. His attorney insists that his client answered all the FBI's questions, but when FBI agents tried to interview him again a few days later, he was gone. 3 months later, 2020's cameras photographed the inside of Urban Moving, and it looked as if the business had been shut down in a big hurry. Cell phones were lying around, office phones were still connected, and the property of dozens of clients remained in the warehouse. The owner had also cleared out of his New Jersey home, put it up for sale, and returned with his family to Israel. Stephen Gordon, the attorney for the 5 Israeli detainees, acknowledged that his client's actions on September 11th would easily have aroused suspicions. You got a group of guys that are taking pictures on top of a roof of the World Trade Center. They're speaking in a foreign language. They got 2 passports on them. One's got a wad of cash on them, and they got box cutters. Now, that's a scary situation. But Gordon insisted that his clients were just 5 young men who had come up to America for a vacation, ended up working for a movie company, and were taking pictures of the event. Ha ha ha, sure. The 5 Israelis were held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, ostensibly for overstaying their tourist visas and working in the United States illegally. 2 weeks after their arrest, an immigration judge ordered them to be deported. But sources told ABC News that FBI and CIA officials in Washington put a hold on the case. 5 men were held in detention for more than 2 months. Some of them were placed in solitary confinement for 40 days. Some of them were given as many as 7 lie detector tests. Since their arrest, plenty of speculation has swirled about the case and what the 5 men were doing that morning. Eventually, The Forward, a respected Jewish newspaper in New York, reported the FBI concluded that 2 of the men were Israeli intelligence operatives. Vince Canestreo, close enough, a former chief of operations for counterterrorism with the CIA, who is now a consultant for ABC News, said federal authorities' interest in the case was heightened when some of the men's names were found in a search of a national intelligence database. Israeli intelligence connection? According to Canestreo, many people in the U.S. intelligence community believe that some of the men arrested were working for Israeli intelligence. Canestreo said there was speculation as to whether Urban Moving had been set up or exploited for the purpose of launching an intelligence operation against radical Islamists in the area. I'm sure that's the truth, guy. The alleged spying was not aimed against the U.S., but at penetrating or monitoring radical fundraising and support networks in Muslim communities like Paterson, New Jersey. You know, if this was the case, why didn't they say that to begin with? I mean, why didn't they say that? You know, you would think that they would have not tried to cover things up so long and waited this long for, you know, this eventually to come out that, you know, they were, you know, just monitoring support networks in the Islamic communities, whatever. You know, it would have, you know. So we know they're, you know, we know that that's a lie, or whatever. For the FBI, deciphering the truth from the 5 Israelis proved to be difficult. One of them, Paul Kurzberg, refused to take a lie detector test for 10 weeks, then failed it, according to his lawyer. Another one of his lawyers told us Kurzberg had been reluctant to take the test because he had once worked for Israeli intelligence in another country. Sources say the Israelis were targeting these fundraising networks because they were thought to be channeling money to Hamas and Islamic Jihad, groups that are responsible for most of the suicide bombings in Israel. The Israeli government has been very concerned, I'm sure, like the U.S.'s liberty, about the activity of radical Islamic groups in the United States that could be a support apparatus to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The most honest state in the world, Israel. They would never lie to us. The men denied that they had been working for Israeli intelligence out of the New Jersey moving company. Aram Horvitz, their Israeli attorney, dismissed the allegations as stupid and ridiculous. So, I guess whatever, we can draw our own conclusion, but we know that they're a bunch of liars, and this is very suspicious. So, whatever they were doing, it wasn't normal. Any other group would do this. I'm sure there would have been a more in-depth, taken serious investigation by the FBI and whatnot, but yeah, there's Haratz there. But anyways, I was going to look up something else. This is interesting because we already went over the article where Netanyahu, not Netanyahu, it was admitted in mainstream how Israel created Hamas and all that. Now, there's a comment by Netanyahu. On supporting Hamas. March 2019. None of this was a secret. In March 2019, Netanyahu told his Likud colleagues, quote, "Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank." Because this article goes into Netanyahu walking right into Hamas's trap. Well, it's kind of hard to do that when Hamas was just a creation of Israel anyway. Their boogeyman organization to, deceive the world and the people to justify their genocide agenda. But you can read this. Because I want to show how the Jews are supremacists. Many of them, not all of them. There's decent, good Jews who do support the Palestinians and don't support Jewish supremacy on the level, at least of what the Zionists are doing. But rabbis praise Hitler. Of course, it was already in the search engine. I love how everybody in these Israel-controlled media and everything, and all the Christian Zionists deny that there's any kind of occupation going on. But according to this rabbi here, he says that the Arabs want to live under Israeli occupation due to their genetic inferiority. Openly promoting Jewish supremacy. Once they're slaves, the Gentiles will want to be our slaves. You hear that? And I don't think he's just talking about Arabs either, but the context is the Palestinians. But I think he just means what he says here, you know? Being a slave to a Jew is the best. Oh. According to John Hagee, this doesn't exist. We are racist. We believe in racism. The Jews are a more successful race. Let's just start with whether Hitler was right or not. He was the most correct person, really, there ever was. He was just on the wrong side. So, Jewish rabbi calls for extermination of all Palestinian males. A Jewish rabbi living in the West Bank has called on the Israeli government to use their troops to kill all Palestinian males more than 13 years old in a bid to end Palestinian presence on this earth. Extremist Rabbi Yosef Faleh, who dwells at the Yitzhar settlement on illegally seized Palestinian land in the northern part of the West Bank, wrote an article in a Zionist magazine under the title Ways of War, in which he called for the killing of all Palestinian males refusing to flee their country, describing his idea as the practical way to ensure the non-existence of the Palestinian race. So, and here's this one I meant to get to too. Meet Avika Biran. I probably pronounced that wrong. Or whatever. Come on, get out of here. The new Likud lawmaker who advocated for extermination camps for Israel's enemies. New Likud MK Avika Biran, whatever, published an editorial in 2010 that supported extermination camps for quote-unquote Amalekites, a thinly veiled euphemism for Palestinians. Radical right-wing activist who has been a leader of the movement to maintain the illegal West Bank outpost of Amona, which is illegal even by Israeli law. This week, Biran became the newest member of the Israeli parliament in Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, replacing lawmaker David Amsalon, who resigned his seat to serve in the Justice Ministry. In 2010, he published an editorial calling for extermination camps for Israel's enemies. The editorial referenced support for extermination camps for Amalekites, a common Jewish euphemism. The Amalekites were a people mentioned in the Bible. It is widely understood that in contemporary Israel, anyway, that Amalekites are a reference to Palestinians. With this in mind, we should look at Biran's unsigned 2010 editorial reported in Haaretz when he was chair of the religious Zionist organization Meinei HaYeshua, Fountains of Redemption, which printed pamphlets that were distributed freely in settlement synagogues. The background for the pamphlet is of great importance. In 2010, the chief rabbi of Safed, together with 17 other prominent local rabbis, issued a ruling that Jews should deny sale or rent a property to Palestinians. The rabbi's ruling was later endorsed by dozens of rabbis, but also opposed by some more liberal ones. Quote, "True, there are also such people, clerks, those who do not want to disturb, who explain that this is not really the religious law, and also that this is only one aspect, and that there are other rabbis who differ, that in short, the politically correct is their daily bread. It is doubtful whether in the past they identified with the non-aesthetic call, whoever is for the Lord, come to me," Exodus 32:26. "It is doubtful whether they took part in our cultural struggles. It is doubtful whether they ever would. Is it interesting whether they would lead the concentration of the Amalekites in extermination camps to others, or perhaps rule that the existence of the Amalek is no longer relevant? Time will tell." Let us first decipher the biblically related coded message to be clear about the message's meaning. Exodus 32 is a particular bloody passage where Moses told those who had heeded his call, "Come to me." Each of men is to fasten his sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from gate to gate, and slay his brother, his friend, and his neighbor. Oh, that's nice and loving. The part concerning the extermination camps for the Amalekites is curious because it uses contemporary terminology, extermination camps, in a future tense with the archaic use of Amalek, which suggests that Amalek is precisely a euphemism. The sentence mocking the rabbis for ruling that the existence of Amalek is no longer relevant emphasizes this, that the Amalekites exist in the form of Israel's contemporary enemies. These are, of course, the Palestinians. Yeah. Wow, listen to this. One example was when 89-year-old Holocaust survivor Eli Zvili was threatened with having his home burned down because he rented rooms for 3 Palestinian students. Zvili had notices pinned to his front door denouncing him as a traitor to Judaism. Wow. These people are just absolutely savage and nuts, aren't they? Influential rabbi teaches would-be Israeli soldiers genocide is a mitzvah. Rabbi Ophir Wallace of the B'nai David military Mechina, was caught on video teaching young would-be soldiers that Israelis are permitted to wipe out Palestinians and that only fear of massive retaliation prevents that. Rabbi Wallace's words can be heard here. Let's see if we can hear. It's all in Hebrew. Can't understand them anyway. Good luck with that. In conquering the land of Israel, according to Nachmanides and Rashi, who say that the wars of today are also mitzvah wars for conquering the land, I am beholden to nothing. This isn't the law of the persecutor, right? What law are we dealing with? The laws of the mitzvah war? A war of occupying the land? Occupying, there we go. Even if I don't conquer Gaza right now, conquering it is part of my ability to settle the land of Israel, so it is also a part of the mitzvah of conquering the land. Therefore it follows, there's no other way. Like, we'd have to kill them all. Loving. Because this is the difference between the law of the persecutor and mitzvah wars. The mitzvah war of conquering the land, which is not limited to saving the people of Israel from their enemies. According to some of the Rish Onim, I could, on the face of it, by the essential law, destroy, kill, and cause to perish all of them. I will not do so, because if I were to do so and reject international treaties, and the state of Israel shall perish, unless we shall witness a miracle of miracles, and one must not trust in a miracle, and that's the only reason I won't do it. So, but going back to the Amalekites, I kind of want to save some of these, actually. Right-wing rabbis ruling, Israel may totally destroy. Here we go again. Deterrent measures to exterminate the enemy are allowed in some cases. Of course, I'd have to subscribe to read the rest of this, but I think the headline here is, just another story to show that these Jews are, a lot of them are just a bunch of psychotic nutbags. But if you go to the Amalekites now, it's in the Old Testament Bible, 1 Samuel 15. And this is one of the reasons why I really just, after reading this stuff, don't get me wrong, I don't totally disbelieve in a possible, God that loves us and all that stuff that's described in the New Testament, whatnot. But I don't know. I kind of put my hope into some of that, but I'd have to say that for me to go and read shit like this, now go and attack Amalek, thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt, because of what they did, years and years ago. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Infants. A nursing child. Can you imagine seeing a movie depicting, we kind of are in the modern 21st century, seeing the footage of, the Palestinians, many of them Christians, by the way. Their fellow Christian Zionists are cheering for their destruction of their own children as they're pulling them out of rubble. Infant and nursing child. So we're kind of seeing that. But could you imagine back then with the swords and everything, and the armies of Israel going into a village and grabbing the nursing babies from from either their mother holding them, or being in their little beds and killing them. Oh, many of them, I'm sure, in front of their mothers. Pretty graphic and evil. So I can't really fully trust that this would, come from a loving God. No matter how many years ago it was. To me, of course, this is a good example on the elites using the Bible as a manual of theirs to justify their agenda, to justify wars and their killing of men, women, and children. And also, just like with the other two, the radical Christian Zionists in particular, and the Jews and the Islamics, the creation of all three of these, I could argue, probably was just a creation of the Brotherhood, probably to keep us divided. Because that's exactly what we are with all three of these religions. People are just brainwashed into thinking that each one of those religions is the right one. We got dozens upon dozens of different sects, cults within each one of those religions as well. And come on, if it's the truth, they shouldn't be so divided. Many of these groups within groups of that, especially Christianity, how many different cults and different denominations are just in that religious cult alone. I don't really mind for the typical ones, as long as they stay out of politics. I have a big problem with the Christian Zionists now, because they're into politics, and a lot of their propaganda that many of those leading pastors, many of whom are just agents or Freemasons or members of, or just Zionists, or on the Zionist payroll, one of them under that category, whatever, are how much money goes over to Israel, how much support goes over to Israel because of these puke-faced pastors, especially that fat fuck John Hagee. It makes me so sick. I've lost all respect for him now. They completely lost my respect. I never even had any respect for him when I realized that, their interpretation of Bible prophecy and concerning Israel is completely not what the New Testament teaches at all. So, there you go. Oops. Guess you can read that a little bit. "47% of Israeli Jews said in a poll conducted last month that Israel should not at all consider the suffering of the civilian Palestinian population in Gaza in the next phase of fighting." Wow. Isn't that something? Yeah, of course they would, because they're a bunch of puke-face agents. So anyways, I'm gonna I'm going to end this video, make another one on more of this. So take care.